Okay, making another friction fire video. Actually, it's going to be more of a, I don't know, thought or discussion of why people practice friction fire, and also I guess I have some concerns, I guess, that I see online, especially online videos like misinformation about, and some myths, I guess, about friction fire making. So this is geared more towards folks that have already gotten success, at least with getting an ember or a coal and blowing it to flame. Some of the reasons why people practice this is out of curiosity or like a personal accomplishment or life experience, just to say they've done it. They'll try anything once and may never practice it again. Other folks, believe it or not, will practice this for fun, as a form of entertainment, as a hobby, even personal sanity. Some folks will practice maybe after a traumatic experience or a wake-up call or a realization that they're unprepared, at least skill-wise. Short-term and long-term survival, like if you're lost on a day hike, or doomsday or apocalypse type scenarios, folks take an interest in the skill, just to still know that they can get fire in an unplanned type situation. Skill, everyone wants to improve their skills, so especially if you're an avid outdoors person, it's a peace of mind or a sense of comfort to know the skill, and it just gives you that added comfort of being out in the woods. Notoriety, people will do this more for ratings. Just hey, I'm making a bunch of videos and I want a bunch of subscribers and whatnot. So they're really not too concerned about the details of friction fire making, other than to show that they can do it, basically, or they're successful with it. And making money. Survival schools teach the skill. It's a common skill that a lot of folks want to know when they're out in the woods. Some concerns that I have, I guess, in relation to, especially when I see a lot of folks make friction fires, is they I don't know, they go about halfway to make it, to being successful with this skill. Typically, I don't know, the mindset is, work smarter, not harder, use the right tool for the right job, for instance. And most folks tend to use ideal tools and materials when practicing this skill. And in a lot of their videos, they'll actually, there's always inferences. I think one of the main reasons why people practice this skill is always, typically from a short-term survival or even long-term survival. Some survival situation. In case you're ever in a survival situation, here's how you can rub two sticks together. But typically it's demonstrated using ideal tools and materials, such as an ideal cutting tool, bushcraft knife, or a hatchet, or an axe, or a hand saw. For cordage, a lot of, 95% of the time folks are using paracord or bank line or, durable cordage of some sort. Bearing blocks, they're using a rock or an antler or animal bone, a bearing block, or even something with a wheel bearing, such as an inline skate wheel, for instance, that you can use. And of course, having an ideal bearing block can, significantly improve your success rate. Ideal materials, ideal wood. Most folks tend to demonstrate using yucca or willow or cedar, basswood, cottonwood. It's like a medium soft wood that's very ideal. And so they demonstrate it and show that they were successful at it, but oftentimes it's it's like backyard bushcraft. Hey, I showed this and I was successful, and look how capable I am, kind of thing. And it's one thing to practice in your backyard. It's a whole different world, basically, when you're out in a wooded environment or out in the wilderness. It's especially unless you bring the set with you. But a lot of folks, because there's the insinuation is it's a survival situation, which means you didn't bring a proven set with you. Or chances are, more than likely, when you do go out in the woods, you're going to be prepared. You're going to bring adequate gear. You're going to bring adequate knives or cutting tools and saws and cordage and whatnot. And I scratch my head when I see these videos, because folks will always suggest, in case you're ever in a survival situation, this is how you can rub two sticks together. And they always seem to have adequate tools, but for some reason will suggest that they left their fire kit at home. So if you're going to be smart enough to bring a good knife and good cordage and be around adequate wood materials, but yet be foolish enough to forget bringing an adequate fire making device, such as lighters or matches, or a ferrocerium rod, or magnesium flint block. So anytime I go out in the woods, I bring all you know, some of this stuff with me. But you know, friction fire making is a last resort. I mean, I'm going to bring, you know, typically what I bring with me is a whole, you know, handful of lighters with me, little mini Bics that you can get for, you know, $2 a package. And I have a bunch of these various pockets in my backpack. You know, got one in my survival kit. I'll usually have one or two on me. Plus I'll have a ferro rod. So I have better ways of making fire than thinking that if I bring my survival bracelet with me, which is, you know, paracord bracelet, so just in case, if I'm going to remember to bring this, I should also be able to remember to bring better ways of making fire. So it's almost pointless to practice friction fire, at least from a survival standpoint, if you're thinking that, you know, as long as, you know, I've got adequate knife, adequate cordage, you know, adequate tools and materials, that I'll be successful. So this is geared more towards, you know, like folks that really are thinking a, you know, what if situation. It's an unplanned scenario, you know. So if you're thinking that way and you want to have the capability to know how to be successful with this in an unplanned scenario, you need to practice that, and you really need to get out of the backyard, get out of your comfort zone basically, and go to a wooded area. Not just, you know, you want to go to an unfamiliar wooded area or an environment that you're not familiar with, so you're not counting on, well, I know exactly where, you know, there's a poplar, you know, forest or cedar or willow or someplace. You want to go someplace where you know you're going to have to pretty much make do with, you know, pick a spot and just say, all right, here I'm going to simulate a survival situation and work with what's available. And also, you know, plan to do it with something less than ideal. So you're not going to have a good bushcraft knife. You might have, you know, practice with a pocket knife, you know, even or a keychain knife. You know, something, you know, that you may have on you, at least in your pocket. Like anywhere I go, anytime I leave my house, I have some kind of a cutting blade, even if it's just a keychain knife. And for cordage, you know, I mean, I rarely carry paracord with me on a daily basis. But, you know, if on, you know, survival situation, I'll just for practice, I'll buy some cheap shoelaces. And, you know, just at the dollar store, you can get a package of 8 of them for $1. So you can practice with this so that, you know, you're not using your real shoelaces, so that if you do tear them up or whatever, it's cheap enough to just get another set. And once you get enough practice in, and I've got various sets here where I practice with different, and believe it or not, the shoelaces hold up quite well. But you want to practice with things you may have on your person, and more than likely, at least if you're ever stranded out in the woods, unless your college buddies tie you up and throw you in the trunk and drive you out in the woods and strip you naked, I mean, you're going to have something on you that you can work with. So some form of clothing, whether it be a bandana maybe, you know, that you can tear this up into strips and make cordage, or, you know, the hem on a t-shirt that you can use, a strip of clothing that you can use as a bowstring for that, your shoelaces or boot laces. If you're, you know, skilled enough, you can actually make some natural cordage, you know, and work with that as a bowstring. But you really, you know, if you really want to be good at this skill, you know, and be capable and consistent, you really need to practice, you know, in an environment where you're more than likely gonna be in an unplanned type situation. In your backyard, you're in your comfort zone, so, you know, it's a good start. You know, you can get proficient with that, but really, it's only, you know, to get an ember, blow it to flame. That, believe it or not, that's actually like 50% of the effort. And when you're out in the woods, out in an unfamiliar environment, believe it or not, it's actually skill to you know, for wood selection, to go and find adequate materials that you can, you know, be able to pick out and make good judgments on. Is this dry enough? Is this, you know, got a, you know, reasonable wood density? The shape that it's in, you know, the state of decay, you know, is it rotted, you know, where it's just going to disintegrate on you or break. You know, and being able to work with what's available. I mean, it might be big or it might be small. If you're working with, you know, a small keychain knife, you're not going to be able to work with a, you know, 6-inch diameter log, you know, as if you had a hatchet or a handsaw. So you're not going to be able to split it down and get the, you know, the nice dry wood in the middle. You know, if you're having to work with, you know, a blade that you might have in your pocket, your wood choice is subjected down to typically, you know, small, you know, branches or pieces of wood that you might be able to break up. And also, even if you make reasonable choices, you're hoping you make a good choice on the first time out. It's very possible, because you're working with unproven materials that are exposed to the elements. So the moisture might be a factor to where it adds to the challenge. So you might make mistakes. You might choose poorly, and you won't really know until you fashion the set and give it a try. And if something breaks or falls apart or whatever due to decay, you might have to go out and find another piece of wood. So it might take you a few tries before you finally get success. And with the practice, you need this experience to know how to be able to adjust and improvise. And also, dealing with weather. I mean, hopefully it's reasonable weather, but it is possible if there was a dense fog earlier that morning or it rained the night before, if the wood is wet, I mean, moisture is probably one of the biggest challenges to getting success with friction fire. Unless you're out in the desert or an arid environment to where humidity levels are very low, then it might not be that hard. Also, I don't think folks really think about it. It's funny when you see in survival books and other tutorials and whatnot that they show you the basic components. You need the spindle, the bearing block, the fireboard, the bowstring, and so on, and show you how to fashion the sets, even like in a Boy Scout manual. But don't mention that, when you realize, all right, this is an unplanned situation. All right, I went on a day hike. I only planned to be out here for a few hours. I only brought some, trail mix and a bottle of water. I didn't bring my pack and my fire kit and everything else to plan to stay the night. And if all of a sudden you realize, all right, I can't find my way back to my car, and I don't know which way to go, and I'm going to have to, I've only got a few hours of daylight left, I'm going to have to probably stay the night out here. Now shock can set in, and panic, and some fear, and now there's a loss of control. I'm not in control of my situation anymore. I don't want to be here anymore. That can affect you psychologically to where it adds to the challenge of making good judgment calls, such as with wood selection and fashioning the set and adjusting and improvising. So that's, like I said, that these are some things that you really need to get experience with. And also time pressure. Time pressure is really not mentioned. If you're in an unplanned situation, you might only have an hour or two of daylight left. So by the time you realize, all right, I guess I'm out here for the night, now you've got 2 hours to find the materials. From forge to flame, find the materials, fashion the set. Probably a few attempts before you finally get success, and of course time to go find firewood and everything else, and figure out what other priorities that you have before it gets dark. Once it's dark, you can't see. And also, of course, figure that there's a possibility that you won't get fire. So you've already got to psychologically prepare yourself that if this doesn't work, to know that more than likely you're going to probably be all right. It's going to suck and you'll be uncomfortable and you'll hate it, but it's at least just for a few hours until daybreak. So there's always that possibility. Of course, nobody ever wants to be uncomfortable or not in control. And I guess one last thing, I've noticed some folks kind of focus on the hand drill, for instance. I'm talking friction fire in general. Typically the bow drill is the friction fire of choice, especially in an unplanned situation. It tends to be the most successful in various environments. So more than likely there's going to be some sort of dead wood that you can use or find to fashion the set. And just about any, there's more options of wood out there than there are, for the bow drill than it is for the hand drill, for instance. With the hand drill, I've seen some folks where, all I want to do is just, I've seen some people that, use 2 sticks and just, spin it a few times, get a coal, and then they're successful. I want to do what that guy did. And they don't even want to learn the bow drill. It's like, I don't want to waste my time with that. That looks more complicated. I just want to, the hand drill looks easier and simpler, and there's fewer parts. So, which is true once you're experienced with it, at least in some cases. But the problem with the hand drill, especially from like a survival type situation, is it has more room for error than the bow drill. You really need better or more ideal wood materials. Typically with the hand drill you want a spindle it's typically made from a wild weed of some sort, or a stalk. Or like a low density type of wood, light low density. The problem with the hand drill is if you're in a survival situation it's less chance that you're going to find, oh look, there's a prairie right there, and there's some mullein that's growing right there, and it just happens to be in season, and you found some dead mullein that's in a good state of decay where it's not too rotted and it won't disintegrate on you, and it's still not alive, where it's last season's stalks. Or there's some cattail over in this swamp or pond area, and cattail works wonderful, but it needs to be dry. And if you're finding it from a swamp area, more than likely it's going to have moisture in it. So to find something on the spot and wanting to get success quickly, hand drill's a bigger challenge. It's good to be proficient with the skill. I've seen some folks online that have gotten very proficient with the hand drill and pretty much abandoned the bow drill and just kind of said, all right, I've mastered the bow drill already, now I'm on to be an expert with the hand drill, and stopped practicing the bow drill. And I'm proficient with both the hand drill and bow drill, and I still prefer the bow drill overall, especially from, like I said, an unfamiliar environment. If you go out and just pick a spot someplace and then say, all right, this is where I'm going to find my materials to make a fire somehow, you're going to have a better chance of finding materials for bow drill than you are with the hand drill. The other concern or problem with the hand drill is you need to keep your skills up with it, basically, mostly from keeping your hands toughened up. So if you've gone a long time without making a hand drill, and all of a sudden you find some materials on the spot and decide you're going to spin up a coal, you really need to make sure you get success within the first few efforts, or you start tearing up your hands and getting blisters and everything else. And the more attempts you do, the more sore your hands become, the less likely you're going to get success. So I really, all right, hand drill, that's actually more of my back pocket option. It's like, all right, it depends on the materials that I think are available at that time. But I don't ever abandon the bow drill option. So it's I don't know, catch-22 or double-edged sword in a way. It's possible, but not as likely to get success with the hand drill as, at least from a, like I said, on the spot standpoint, unless you're in the desert, or it's very abundant that you have wild stalks that are growing all around you. So I mean, there are some exceptions. So anyway, these are my thoughts on friction fire, at least more from a survival perspective, because that seems to be what, I don't know, the majority of folks tend to think of it. It's one thing to practice in your backyard, or for fun, or entertainment, or even for teaching. Same thing when you teach somebody, you're always using like a student set that's, like I said, with ideal tools and materials. So it's another story when you really start practicing with, all right, for real, I'm going out in the woods, and all right, here's my scenario or situation, and can I do it without a good knife, or without good cordage, or without good wood materials? That's really, you want to work your way up to that. And that's my thoughts on friction fire. So, any questions or corrections, even if you think I'm wrong in some way, definitely let me know, and I'll see what I can do. Okay, I almost forgot to mention another important aspect of friction fire making, and that's, of course, the tinder bundle material. So, of course, it's one thing when you're in your backyard and you can practice with proven materials that have been stored dry in your house. The same goes like with the tinder bundle material, is of course going into a wild, wilderness environment, especially in an unfamiliar wilderness environment, and then trying to find adequate tinder bundle material. Of course, and hopefully it's dry. It's one of the big challenges. So not only is it tough to spin up a coal or an ember, but now, all right, you got half your success right there. The other half is to make sure that you can blow that ember into flame. And a lot of times you might get successful getting the coal, and then not be able to blow the tinder bundle into flame. So this is definitely another aspect that you'll want to practice, like I said, outside your comfort zone. So definitely want to go beyond the backyard, basically. So anyway, thanks.